Thanks for tuning into my channel. The purpose of this channel is to promote discussions and conversations regarding philosophically meaningful concepts and ideas. Today, we are going to discuss the importance of the leaders of our government conveying the truth. On the surface, it seems silly, but let's explore what we mean by the truth. The truth has been a philosophical concept that has been studied and argued for about as long as humans have lived in civilizations. Starting with Plato and generally standing up to the test of time, civilized societies have accepted the truth as being assertions, thoughts, or propositions which state facts or are in accordance with what is the case. Our founding fathers believed the pursuit of truth to be fundamental and foundational to our existence as a self-governing democratic republic. In an article titled Our Founders' Messy Truths by Armstrong Williams, published on July 3, 2019, Mr. Williams states, "For Jefferson, the light of science proved the truth of mankind's inherent freedom. He embraced what at the time was nothing more than a fashionable trend in Enlightenment philosophy and empiricism. It assumed that enlightened societies could be produced when democratic governments ruled with the consent of the governed, and critically, the populations of those societies had unfettered access to the truth. It was evident that without enough information, enough truth that is, it was impossible for a free people under a democratic government to intelligently exercise their freedoms. Without the enlightened exercise of democracy, the people might find themselves effectively re-enslaved." According to the Oxford Dictionary, the definition of faith is complete trust or confidence in someone or something. The most thorough thoughts on faith tend to come from religiously connected philosophers, but the faith we are really discussing is analogous to trust. If society does not trust its government or its systems, whether they be economic, financial, commercial, educational, judicial, defense, that government will eventually cease to exist. It seems sensible to hold that one should only trust with good reason, but we often lack adequate, or in many cases any, evidence of a trustee's trustworthiness in advance of our venture of trust. Yet in many such cases, we suppose that our trust is reasonable. But if adequate evidence of trustworthiness is not required for reasonable trust, how is reasonable trust different from blind trust? This problem might be avoided by arguing that the question of when one may rationally trust another may be resolved by a decision which includes factoring in the extent to which one's evidence supports the potential trustee's trustworthiness. But this approach misses something important in our social intercourse, where we generally count it a virtue to be ready to trust others without such prior calculation. Perhaps our most faithful president was one of the least religious, Abraham Lincoln. His faith was born out of humility and necessity. The faith it took to navigate civilians and the military through a civil war was enormous. This show of faith was dwarfed, however, when Abraham Lincoln required of us to proceed through a reconstruction and reconciliation effort with malice towards none. Faith or trust is required for our society to function. Imagine not trusting the safety of the food at the grocery store, the measurement of the gasoline dispenser at the gas station, the likelihood of fire when driving a car or flying in an airplane. Imagine the impact on our society's ability to administer justice when faith in it is lost. What happens to that society when that faith or trust is lost or diminished? If our government fails to deliver truth when it communicates or otherwise deals with us, how long will our faith in that government last? President Trump has been a salesperson and a promoter for most of his adult life. If you read biographies of President Trump, he very clearly is Machiavellian in his approach to deal-making, leadership, and management. He will withhold information and use deceit as a strategy for the purpose of obtaining victory. Deception is a tool employed by Machiavellian adherents. Unfortunately, President Trump seems to view everything through the lens of victories and defeats, even domestic matters. He seems to have failed to have adapted to seeking a unified approach to leading the citizens of the United States, regardless of the situation in front of us. Should the president view every situation and every action he takes through the lens of competition against other human beings? Doesn't Western philosophy teach us that our leaders are to be sacrificing servants rather than transactional generals? The Constitution of the United States enumerates very few powers to the president. Congress has bestowed additional powers and, of course, because the president is enumerated as the executive of the government of the United States, he does have many implied powers. However, I would argue the president's most important powers are soft powers. Soft powers are the powers that enable the president to move markets, rally citizens, affect public opinion, guide us through war, lead us into new frontiers. Soft powers are derived from long periods of action, which are based on high standards of ethical, moral, cultural, and political values, attributes worthy of trust, faith. These attributes and character of the executive must reflect those of our culture, our society. Those soft powers are a part of the office of the executive, and each inhabitant of the office is a trustee of those powers. Those powers are not codified. They are the product of faith, faith in our government, faith in our executive, faith in our culture, faith in our civilization. If you erode this faith, if this trust is lost, these soft powers go away. Our presidents have not been men that were saintly, holy, or without error. Our great presidents have been those who have led us to discover new or poetic truths. Poetic truths are different than demonstrable truths. Poetic truths convey truth by using words to trigger insights into the nature of everyday social life and existence. Poetic speech resonates with ordinary experience, triggering, clarifying, and consolidating insights into the realities of our everyday socio-cultural existence. It works to attune us and ground us in the norms of social existence. Listen to the words of our founding fathers, we the people, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, secure the blessings of liberty for ourselves and our posterity to ordain and establish. The preamble of the Constitution is part of the conveyance of soft power to the government, to the Congress, to the executive, to the judiciary, and ultimately to our country. And the foundation of our country is built on the poetry of the Declaration of Independence. Again, listen to the words. When in the course of human events, to assume among the powers of earth the laws of nature and nature's God, a decent respect to the opinions of mankind, and of course, we hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal. These statements were not demonstrably true then, and they are not demonstrably true today. But they continue to be our aspiration, our hope, our destination. We expect our president to lead us on a journey toward the truths enumerated in our founding documents, to forge a path away from our demons of the past into that shining city on a hill, which will be our collective salvation for this life and for our posterity. How do you prioritize the character of the individual versus the policies of the individual? Given your prioritizations, who do you plan to vote for in this upcoming election? I look forward to hearing your views and comments.